Welcome to Dark Knight Films Reviews. I'm your host, Matt Spease, and today we are doing a top 10 of our favorite game show TV hosts. I am joined today by the illustrious Buddy Campbell.
Illustrious, I like that. Makes me feel distinguished and important.
Well, we wouldn't have it any other way for a favorite game show hosts list.
Well, when you're as old as I am, you know about game shows because that was a staple growing up in the 70s and 80s, and so I watched so many game shows over the years, unbelievable. So I've seen not as much from this century.
No, me neither. That's why probably our lists. I can pretty much
classic game show hosts.
Yeah, I can pretty much say both of our lists is probably going to be more of the older classics.
You got some good ones now. You know, Steve Harvey's great. Jeff Foxworthy was hilarious. And Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Pat Sajak's been around forever. But I focus my list on classic game show hosts from more like the 70s, 80s, 90s era.
So did I. All right, so let's get started with our number 10. And my number 10 is going to be Gene Rayburn from Match Game. And in my research for this, I didn't realize he was on that show as long as he was. He hosted that show from 1962 to 1984.
Wow.
And I thought it was only like few years in the 70s, and then you see the reruns of it and you just think it's during the 70s. But no, he was on that show consistently for that long, and anybody that sticks with that thing for that long and is consistently and does as good a job as he did, because he was so likable on Match Game. And he was so fun with his guests.
It was the interactions between the panelists.
Right, yeah. With his little guest panelists that he'd have, because he'd have different ones, different periods.
Some that were pretty regular.
Right.
Charles Nelson Riley, Brett Summers, Richard Dawson, some people like that. Fannie Flagg, but then he'd bring in some people just out of the blue you wouldn't think would be on there.
Exactly.
Orson Welles was on there.
Yeah. So, but he was so good at, whenever he would ask come up with a little sentence that he was saying, the way he said it, when he does the blank part, he would say it in such a way that it would make the panelists, all of them would chuckle, thinking about some dirty-minded answer that they wanted to put in there.
Well, I like how he would go in character.
Old Man Periwinkle said,
He's really awful.
"Excuse me. When I was younger, I used to like life in the fast lane. Now I can't even make it out of the blank."
He was so fun. He was just a fun little host, and that's what I liked about him. He would enjoy. He seemed to enjoy his job doing.
I think that's what makes a good game show host is being likable and funny and entertaining.
And I think Gene Rayburn did it, and that's why I had to put him on my list at number 10. So, what do we have on your number 10?
Well, I'm going to start off with a guy who was actually hosted 15 different shows when I looked this up. His name is Bill Cullen. He was a guy who was on like Hot Potato, Blockbusters, Pyramid, Password Plus, and so forth. But for him to be asked to host 15 different shows just tells you how well respected he was in the industry. Just a rock solid guy. He wasn't he wasn't necessarily a barrel of laughs, but he was likable enough. He had those dark horn rimmed glasses, and early on he had the crew cut, back in the 60s.
Right.
And but yeah, for anybody that's done 15 different shows, he's got to be in a top 10 list for game show hosts. So Bill Cullen is my number 10.
Well, we both put someone who was long-standing, but I put one that was long-standing in one show, and you put one that was long-standing in multiple shows. All right, well, my number 9 is going to be Chuck Woolery. And Chuck Woolery had done, almost like he said with Bill Cullen, I mean, he had done Wheel of Fortune, Love Connection, Scrabble, Greed, Lingo. I mean, he was on multiple shows.
Dating Game.
and he was likable. He was so likable. You know, he would come on there and he just like Gene Rayburn. To me, that's going to be a staple for my things. If they seem like they enjoy what they're doing, you know, and like being there, that's going to go on. They're going to go, you know, pretty good on my list, you know.
You get some game show hosts, and I'm not going to call any out by name, but they just hated their job. They just didn't want to be there.
Right. And Chuck Woolery wasn't like that.
A lot of these actors turned game show hosts. It was almost like, this is beneath me to be here.
Right, exactly.
And, you know, you just can't look at that way. You got to enjoy your job, you know, to be successful at what you're doing. That's why those actors turned game show hosts didn't last very long.
Right.
And just likable people like Chuck Woolery been around as long as he did. You know, that's the blueprint of showing how it's done.
Yeah, Chuck Woolery, he was the original host of Wheel of Fortune.
Do you remember who the girl was that turned the letters when you actually had to turn the letters back then?
But why don't you inform everyone?
That was Susan Stafford. And the name may not be familiar to you, but she's got a famous actress niece by the name of Carla Gugino.
Wow.
So, where are we up to?
So, what is your 9?
My number 9 is a guy who actually was a radio DJ, legendary radio DJ in Tennessee, I believe, before he got into TV. And he became iconic with the TV game show Tic-Tac-Doe. And that would be the legendary Wink Martindale, who was on that show for a long time. And he did a couple other game shows like Yahtzee, I believe. But yeah, he'll forever be the face of Tic-Tac-Doe.
So that's
my number 9.
That's your number
Wink
9.
Martindale.
Okay. All right. So my number 8 is Alex Trebek. Now, Alex Trebek, everybody knows him for just Jeopardy. But he was more than just Jeopardy. He hosted the Wizard of Odds. He did High Rollers. He did Classic Concentration, as well as Jeopardy. So he was all around the board. He was similar to Chuck Woolery as far as a guy that hosted multiple shows.
And the most legendary mustache as well, I believe.
Right.
You never really saw a game show host with facial hair. I think he was one of the few that got away with it. I think because he was Canadian, they didn't want to say you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that on television. Who says I can't? But he's one of those, you know, he had really good personality. He was likable, you know, as well. Just so that's the big thing for me with one of these hosts. He's got to be really likable. I got to be able to connect with him. And he seemed to always like the shows he was on. He didn't never seem like, I don't want to be here. You know?
Right. And he was intelligent because most of the game shows doesn't really take a lot of smarts, but on Jeopardy, there were a lot of questions on there that might have to do with, you know, medicine or engineering or something like that. He had to pronounce all those long words, scientific names, you know, and he was very good at that without in pronouncing them correctly.
He would nail it. Yeah, he would nail it. Yep. So that's my number 8. So what's your 8?
Well, my number 8 is from a guy who didn't do a lot of shows, but he's known for one, and he was the face of Hollywood Squares in the 70s, and that would be the legendary Peter Marshall. Peter was great on that show. He had a lot of fun with the panelists that were up there, especially the comedians like Paul Lynde and George Gobel and people like that. He had some good interaction between them. Guy always had a smile on his face. You know.
Yeah, it's just like all the other ones I've
He enjoyed being there.
Yeah, he enjoyed being there. Yeah. That's the
And
best
so
thing.
he had the perfect personality to be a game show host. And so that's why when Hollywood Squares were hosted by several different hosts since then, but he's the one that I always think of when I think of Hollywood Squares is Peter Marshall. So he's my number 8.
Cool. All right. Well, my number 7 is Bert Convy. Bert Convy did Tattletales, he did Super Password, and he did Win, Lose, or Draw. And to me, Win, Lose, or Draw was his big one that I remembered him from. And Super Password I've seen a little bit more, but Tattletales is not one that I really watched that much to know a lot about that one. But those other two, I watched him a lot during those, and I loved him the way he was just a fun host as well.
Right. Well, Bert was the exception to the rule of actors turn game show hosts because he was an established actor before that in the 60s and 70s, but when he started hosting the game shows, he actually enjoyed being there. You know, it wasn't like some of the others I mentioned earlier who felt it was beneath them to be a game show host. So, but yeah, good call on that. Bert was real likable, and he, your number 10, Gene Rayburn on the Match Game. Bert Convy was a panelist on there quite a bit.
Yep, he was.
That probably was how he fell in love with the game shows. Was being on that.
Yep. So, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is one of yours that you just named, Alex Trebek. Alex was the consummate pro. He did 10 game shows total in his career. He did others, before Jeopardy. You mentioned some of them, Battle Stars and High Rollers, and Pitfall was another one that he did. But once he got his footing on Jeopardy, and I don't think he was the original host of Jeopardy, but he was the one who became the face of Jeopardy for all those years, and so there's no way not having Alex Trebek on this list. So
yeah, he probably hosted that show on Jeopardy as long as what Gene Rayburn did on
20 over 20 some years.
Right, exactly.
So Alex is my number 7.
All right. Well, my number 6, he only did one show, but it was a great one. And this is Dick Clark on the $1,000 Pyramid. And that show went through a bunch of different names throughout the years. $25,000 Pyramid, $100,000 Pyramid, but it was always still the same show. That show was just so great just because of the personality. That man is just so charismatic. He just would. He could get on a dental floss commercial and make it entertaining.
Yeah, he had I associate Dick more with music, from like American Bandstand, and stuff like that. He always did like the New Year's Eve show and things like that. But he was so at ease in front of the camera. I mean, he never got nervous. He was in front of the camera so much in his life that it was just second nature to him. And that at ease personality really helped him be successful as a game show host. But remember the nickname he had, all through those years, he was the world's oldest teenager.
Right. And he maintained
Because he
that.
had fun, just like a kid.
And he maintained it because, I mean, he never seemed to age. Even, you know, the last time he was celebrating New Year's before he passed, he still looked as good as he's ever looked.
Yeah.
He always looked in tip-top shape. He was always, you know, so, I mean, yeah, I'll always love him for the $1,000 Pyramid. The way he hosted that show was just so good.
Yeah.
But so, what is your?
My number 6 is from he started off in the '60s and with like Beat the Clock and Split Seconds and shows that were a little bit before my time. But I grew up in the '70s just watching him on an iconic game show called Let's Make a Deal, and that's going to be Monty Hall. Monty was just the face of Let's Make a Deal, and he had so much fun on it. He's like a used car salesman, you know, on there, and you know, everybody in the audience were dressed, you know, they were in some
silly costume,
some type of costume, like they were going to Halloween or something like that. And so you know, he had fun with that, you know. But he like, do you want the box or do you want the curtain? You know, I mean, so yeah, I just love Let's Make a Deal growing up, so I had to put Monty Hall in at number 6.
Well, ironically, my number 5 is Monty Hall.
Great minds think alike.
So I put him a little higher than you did, but
That's pretty close.
But same reason I put him at number 5 because, I mean, yes, he was only on one show basically, but look how long he did it successfully. You know, it wasn't just the 70s. You know, he started in the 70s on it, but it went into the 80s, that show did. And hell, they brought him back in the 90s even.
Yeah.
I mean,
he did other shows, but that was before we started. We were old enough to watch him.
Right.
Say in the 60s, you know.
Right.
Beat the Clock and stuff like that was before our time. So we just see him as close to one show that we ever saw.
Yep.
Well, my number 5 was a guy who did only do one show. He's the only one on the list that only did one, but he did it so iconically that he was the producer of the show. He created the show. He was the show, and that is Chuck Barris on the Gong Show. I mean, that guy just had so much fun on there, and that was America's Got Talent before America's Got Talent.
Right, it was.
I mean, it was the same concept. People would get up there, they'd perform their act, they would get judged on it 1 to 10.
Basically what America's Got Talent is.
And if you didn't
basically just their version of the Gong Show.
If they didn't like you, they picked up and hit the gong, and that was the end of your act.
Right, exactly.
But he had so much fun with it. But you get like J.P. Morgan on there and Jamie Farr and all of these judges that were so iconic to the show. And then they would have some plants on there that really wasn't real contestants. They were just regulars that came back, you know, from time to time, like Gene the Dancing Machine, you know, or the unknown comic who's telling all these jokes with a paper bag over his head, you know. But I just love that show, especially when you're a kid. You know, it was entertaining, you know, and they ended up making a movie on it. Where you had Sam Rockwell playing Chuck Barris, and I think it was called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind or something like that. I think George Clooney was the director on that, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think he's the only game show host that actually had a Hollywood movie made about him. Yep. But Chuck Barris was cool and funny, and along with Alex Trebek, they had the 2 best perms when it came. They both had the curly hair, so,
right.
But anyway, Chuck's my number 5.
Cool. All right. Well, my number 4 is Wink Martindale. Now, Wink Martindale, you already mentioned him on yours, but I put him a little higher on mine just because, I mean, I watched him on stuff like Gambit and Tic-Tac-Toe and High Rollers and Debt and everything, and they were just so, he like a lot of these, he's just so entertaining. He's just so fun to watch on those shows, you know.
He had the perfect teeth, the perfect smile. He was a dentist dream, you know. You know, he had that, you know, every hair in place, you know, hairdo with that toothpaste smile, and but did it for so long. You know, he was so at ease as well because he had done radio before that, you know, and before he got into TV. But yeah, I love Wink Martindale.
Yeah, Wink. I put him a little higher than you did on my list, but
still in the top.
but he's still in our top 10. What's your number 4?
Well, my number 4 is a guy who I first saw on a 60s TV show called Hogan's Heroes. And then he became a regular panelist on Match Game with Gene Rayburn. And then he got his own game show and became a darling of game show hosts. And that's the legendary Richard Dawson. I mean, on Family Feud, I mean, he was the face of Family Feud in the 70s and 80s. And he said he started as an actor in Hogan's Heroes, and he was also in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. What was the name of that?
Running Man.
Running Man, that's right. And, but yeah, he was so iconic because he was the game show host that kissed all the female contestants.
Right. Yeah.
And so my grandfather, whenever, you know, it came on at like 6:30 every night, right after the news. And so he would, you know, as a kid, I wasn't watching the news, but whenever Family Feud came on, he'd yell down the hall. He said, "Come in here and watch Kisser." So that's what he always called Richard, was Kisser.
But Dawson's a good kisser. He'll give you a consolation kiss afterwards. What's that? Oh, you got the $100. That's his irrevocably, and we got gifts and all that.
He had so much fun on that too, you know, and he was also a former actor that being a game show host wasn't beneath him. But he would get into some of the answers and get cracked up by some of the answers, just like we did. One in particular, he was on the bonus round, and the woman got up there, and
What months of bread? Hold the clock. Fine, I'm fine. We'll do it. Here we go. Journey.
I mean, he actually fell down to his knees and hitting the floor, laughing so hard. But he enjoyed being there, you know, and so, you know, you got to have Richard Dawson high in my mind, and so I've got him at number 4.
All right. Well, my number 3 is another host that is only one show, and that was Peter Tamarkin, Press Your Luck. To me, he was so good on Press Your Luck, and just like a lot of these other ones, he looked like he enjoyed doing it. He looked like he was having so much fun up there doing that. And it was so much so that when they brought back the Whammy, with the Whammy show, which was a failure to me. It wasn't near as good.
They changed the title.
It just wasn't near as good.
From Press Your Luck to Whammy.
Yeah, and it just wasn't as good a show, and that's why it didn't last. But the thing was, the creators of that new version had Peter Tomarken ready to come in and host it again. And they chose to go with someone else.
Yeah, and it
Why
was,
would you do that? That man was Pressure Luck.
when it comes to executive producers making decisions, you never ask why, because most of the time they make no sense.
They don't make no sense. Because and look what happened to that show. It
And
didn't make it.
I was sad about Peter too, because him and his wife died in a helicopter crash, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he died.
They were actually going to a charity benefit, I believe, whenever the helicopter crashed, and so that was a sad day. But
He was so proud of what he had with Pressure Luck. He was proud of that. He even did a little documentary where they were talking about the controversy, where the cheater, the guy that just kept winning and winning and winning, and he was cheating. They did a documentary on that, and he was happy to be there and talk about it, and everything. Peter Tomarken that's why he's my number 3.
my number 3 is a repeat here. I've got Chuck Woolery at number 3.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Chuck was just so great, and I actually think he was in radio as well before he got into TV. I know he actually was a singer, and because he was on some other shows as a guest where he was playing the guitar and singing. He was from Kentucky, I believe, but he really was into country music and was great at that as well. But like we said before, he just loved being there. He was all smiles all the time, just great personality, enjoyed what he was doing, and not only with Wheel of Fortune, but like I said, Love Connection, Dating Game, Scrabble, shows like that. I mean, he was just all over the place. And
Always enjoyed being there. Yeah.
And he would still make a great host now if somebody wanted him.
Yeah. He's still around.
Yeah. So I got Chuck at number 3.
Good. All right. Well, my number 2 is another repeat. It is Richard Dawson.
Got to be up there.
I put Richard Dawson up here, not only, like you said, he got started on kind of like Bert Convy, he was acting before this and then went into Match Game, and both of them, being little centerpieces in that Match Game, they probably just got the feeling that, man, I'd like to host one of these things, and that's where both of them eventually went. And they both went there with success, ironically. How funny is that,
What people don't realize about game show hosts is that it's what I've heard, that they don't work 5 days a week. They work 1 day a week. They film 5 shows for that week in 1 day. So, like Family Feud, Richard Dawson only works 1 day a week. He has 5 suits at the in his dressing room,
Right.
and he changes between every episode, which looks like it's a different night, but all 5 he did that week was shot in 1 day.
Right.
So that gives a good opportunity for a lot of free time if you chose to become a game show host. Well, you're only working 1 day a week,
Right.
and that leaves you plenty of time for other projects. So,
And I loved how, after he did Family Feud, he wasn't afraid to go on to Running Man and completely do a parody of what he did on the Family Feud in a serious action film, but show behind the scenes where he's on there and he's still doing his little thing, but then as soon as the camera's cut, you're hearing him cuss like a sailor, and you're like, I never thought I'd ever hear Richard. I never thought I'd ever hear Richard do that. But yeah, that's why he's my number 2.
well, my number 2 is got to be near the top of my favorite game shows of all time, and that would be the original Newlywed Game. And Bob Eubanks is my number 2. the dude was so fun to watch. That a lot of the stuff that they did on there probably wouldn't make it past the censors today. A lot of the stuff got censored back then as well. But because he would sort of lead some of the contestants into an answer and take it somewhere that they really didn't know where they were going. Because a lot of times they would ask something, like what would your husband say is his favorite condiment? And the wives, I don't know what that is, and then, they would say, something like, I don't know, Trojan, or something like that. And I actually met Bob Eubanks. He's the only game show host on here that I've met. When I was living in Branson, Missouri back in the 90s, he was in town, and place I worked at, he came by, and I got to meet him, and recognized him right away because it was freaking Bob Eubanks. But yeah, he was larger than life in person as well as he was on screen. But I just love watching reruns of the Newlywed Game a whole lot more than the newer Newlywed Games, which I don't even bother with. So, that's why I have Bob Eubanks at number 2.
All right. Well, my number 1, he was on several shows, but only one is his big one, and that is Bob Barker. He did Truth or Consequences before he did The Price is Right, but nobody thinks about Truth or Consequences anymore today.
Well, that's my line, which he did in the 60s.
But, I mean, him on The Price is Right, the way he would just come out, he's holding the mic, the way he would walk around, and the way he just seemed to just enjoy walking up to his little contestants and talking to them. And he would want to interview them first, before he even, it's like, tell me a bit about yourself.
Yeah, where you from? Yeah.
He wouldn't just go, oh, thank you for coming up here. Now here's what we're going for. He would actually, try and be, and all that, and it's just so he
play
was
Plinko now, and go right into it.
But he was so personable with the contestants, and he was caring too. Some of those girls would get carried away when they spin the freaking wheel and they'd almost fall down. He's ready to catch them.
Sure he was. Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, don't fall."
And he loved his dogs and cats too. He started closing every show.
Don't forget to have your pet spayed or neutered.
Yeah, help control the pet population. Yeah. But yeah, he was rock solid. For
and just like Gene Rayburn. I mean, he did it for so long. I mean, starting in the 70s and then going all the way up until, I think he did it all the way up until 2000.
About the time he appeared in an Adam Sandler movie, wasn't it?
I love that, because I'm not a big fan of Adam Sandler, and I loved seeing Bob Barker kick his ass.
I think you've had enough. No? Now you've had enough, bitch.
But yeah, I think that's what ingratiated Bob Barker with the younger crowd, the millennials, was his appearance on that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Bob was great. I liked him. But my number 1 is another repeat. We've brought his name up so many times already, but yeah, Gene Rayburn to me is the greatest game show host ever. Match Game was the funniest show. He was so good, and he was a dirty old man on there because He would flirt with
Mm-hmm.
the contestants. He would flirt with the panelists.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and he would
Yeah, you
have
definitely
a lot of innuendos,
Yeah, yeah,
with the
you
way he would say
yeah,
things.
Yeah, you
know.
definitely couldn't do that show the way it was produced back then.
But the
now.
dude had the worst suits ever. You know, all of these plaid suits from the 70s that they were with white shoes. You know,
Well, he pretty much maintained
and
that.
those wide ties.
Even when he made it into the 80s, he still maintained those
Sure,
same crazy
sure.
clothes.
But he's number one because like I said, he did a couple other shows before that, like Break the Bank and Movie Masters and some shows after that. But he was able to be funny. He was stylish, for lack of a better word, with his dress, but he was fun. He had a great time on the show.
And I think he, at the time, when he did Match Game, like I said, he was one of the longer reigning game show hosts on there on TV.
Yeah, Match Game changed its name a few times.
Many,
Super Match Game,
right,
Match Game
right.
76.
But
It was still the same show.
But it was still the same show, yeah.
Right.
But not many hosts stayed with the show other than somebody like Bob Barker, from the very
Alex
beginning.
Trebek,
Yeah.
And
But Alex Trebek didn't start
the show, but I think one of the guys that's currently hosting now holds the record for longevity, and that's Pat Sajak, I believe.
Yeah.
Has done Wheel of Fortune.
And I thought about he's probably on my list as an honorable mention. He probably might have made number 11 for me. Pat would, because Pat's good too. But
yeah, he was great. Just maybe not as funny or colorful as some of the other guys.
No. He's just more straight laced. He was.
Yeah. And but for entertainment value, Gene Rayburn was hard to beat. As most of the people on my list, between Gene Rayburn and Bob Eubanks and Richard Dawson, Chuck Barris, all of them just entertaining, loving their job, and they are the face of that show.
I think that is what makes both of our lists, even though they're different, consistent. Because we both listed guys that loved doing what they do.
And everyone on your list that I didn't put on mine were ones I tried to put on my top 10, but there just wasn't enough room. So there was about 15 or 20 names that I think we could have put on there. And
but it's funny because we're doing this as a two together, so they all got their love on this show.
But I enjoyed doing this walk down memory lane, researching some of these old game shows when I was making my list out. Didn't want to overlook anybody,
right?
And I went to one source. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of game show hosts on American TV in my lifetime, and to narrow it down to these 10 legends was pretty hard to do. But our lists are pretty close, and the ones that made your list or made my list, I think we both considered those for our list too,
right,
that were right there at the honorable mention stage.
Exactly.
But game shows were just so fun, and growing up, it was families could watch together and have enjoyment watching. And if you have a game show host that enjoys what he's doing and having a good time and is personable and likable, then that's gold. So.
Right, and that's why all of these guys we listed here, you could tell that they all loved it. They enjoyed what they did, and that's why we put them on our list. Well, hope you enjoyed our little walk down memory lane, as Buddy mentioned. But if you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And
let us know if there's somebody we left off.
yeah, and the comments down below, give us your top 10 of who your favorite game show hosts were.
I mean, there's guys like Jim Perry that I wanted to put on there, who was on a lot of shows. Jim Lang, Alan Ludden. You just, it was just too hard to dwindle them all down to 10. But, game shows are such a fabric in our society that, a good game show host and will be remembered forever, like most of these guys on this list.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, list your top 10. Let us know what you thought of our list and what you think your list might have been. And we will see you guys next time.